In one word, I would say poetry is expression.
Poetry is just a way of expressing yourself with words.
I think most of the time people hear spoken word poets and they think, oh, snaps and like French hats to the side, and it's not that at all.
It's the combination of language, whether written or spoken, to convey a message that you otherwise can't.
And it's not just about getting on stage the first time, but wanting to keep being on stage and keep getting better.
Just like any art form, it's a medium for expressing emotion or experience. It gives you an opportunity to paint a world that in other places might not exist.
We're the historians. Poetry is telling a story from life experiences and from the life experiences of those of others. So poetry to me is poets are the voice of the voiceless, the people who can't express or don't know how to verbalize. Poetry does that.
I mean, you can write paragraphs, you can write stories, you can do a lot of things with words. I just think poetry is the most concise, and it gives the best medium while giving the audience like that good 3.5 minutes of this is who I am or this is what you should care about.
The city of Columbus is filled with poetry. There's a poetry night almost every night of the week, and if you really want to get into this, there are a lot of people who want to help. There's a lot of areas where you can go and share.
Wow, the poetry scene in Columbus is very unique in the sense that you have so many different venues, like you have my spot on every second and last Saturday of the month.
Between the Poetry Forum on Monday nights,
You have a Tuesday night spot.
Righting Wrongs Poetry on Tuesday nights, Writer's Block Poetry on Wednesday nights.
There's the Writer's Block, which is probably, that's the one I've been going to for the longest. That's like one of my homes as far as poetry is concerned. Really great place, ran by Scott Woods. He's like one of the leaders, if not the leader in the Columbus poetry scene.
You have Scott Woods, who's not only a phenomenal poet, but he's been running his poetry venue for like 20 years, if not more.
And Thursday nights is the Ness open mic.
We have the Ness Open Mic Experience, which is also an incredible place. That's where I made, like I said, that's the second home to me as well, ran by JG, myself and Janelle.
You have JG, the Juggernaut, who has his Thursday night venue. They're about to start another venue on Wednesday night at Pure Lounge. So poetry in Columbus is actually thriving, and not only is it thriving, but the level of poetry is phenomenal.
So I'm pretty fresh to the poetry scene in Columbus, but from what I have experienced, it is pretty incredible and diverse.
We have open mics weekly in the city, and it's a beautiful thing to see how many people will be into it and do it and still have so many people who don't know.
There's a community of poets that tend to go to all of these events at one point or another, and it's really familiar, it's really homey, it's really welcoming.
That's why I love it here. That's why I don't think if I ever moved, it'd have to be to another poetry hub, because you kind of get spoiled by the fact that you live in such an enriched society with regards to poetry. Because you go to other places and you're kind of like, oh man, they got some stuff happening, but it's not like home.
You'll walk into a place and do one piece and have 10 people come up to you and introduce themselves to you and talk to you and then invite you somewhere else, and you go there and the same thing happens.
There's so much poetry in Columbus, it's almost ridiculous. Like, if there's not a single night that you can be in Columbus and say, I don't have poetry.
There's a lot of intercommunication between all these different poets, and they all show a lot of love and support for each other. So the Columbus poetry scene, as a little subsect of the Ohio poetry scene, is great, and it's this small little tight-knit family, and it's very welcoming. And then you start to realize that everyone's got cousins, and those cousins have cousins, and it keeps going and going and going.
You have poets that will get up and just say the words or read it off of paper, but performance poetry is exactly that. You're acting, you're putting cadence on words.
I think when you're writing poetry, it gets a little different when you're performing it, because when you're performing poetry, you actually have a goal to reach people, or at least you should. I think a lot of people do poetry when they're composing it and stuff like that. They're writing it for themselves, and that's great. But if you're going to get in front of people and you're going to, want them to pay attention to you for however long you're on stage, the goal or the object should be to be writing it so you can reach somebody or touch somebody or inject some kind of emotion into a crowd.
The most important person in the room in performance poetry is not the person performing, it's the people watching.
When you write a poem down, you're really almost embracing that physical medium. Whereas when you speak a poem, when you spit a poem, when you perform a poem, the medium is now your voice. They say a man has three voices. The one he hears in his head, the one he hears on his lips, and the one everybody else hears when he speaks. Your poem may mean one thing to you, but reading it to someone else could unlock an entire new door of emotions or experiences for someone else. And so I think every poem deserves to be heard.
I think when it comes to performing, nothing will ever replace being on a stage and actually performing in front of people. You can do it in your living room as many times as you want, in front of the mirror, in front of your classmates, but to get up on a stage and feel the adrenaline and to watch all of that energy channel into the emotions of the poem that you wrote, there's nothing that can replace that feeling and make you understand what it's going to be when you get up there.
And pretty soon you're getting invited to do features, or you're getting invited to open mics, and it's incredible, because it's just this word of mouth that takes off like wildfire. If they write or spit poetry and it's from the heart and it's honest and it's open and it's true to themselves and true to who they want to be, or true to the message they're trying to convey, then that right there is good poetry in the sense that it's good art.
If you stick to it and you think about it like that, you don't have any bad experience. You just have a lot of poems.
Because hip hop was my first love, but from that spawned poetry.
And from poetry, it's about creating the images. With rap and songwriting is a lot more about the beats and the flow and how it sounds all together. And while spoken word poetry has that as well, there's something more to say about all of it is really steeped in this emotional center and then trying to create concrete images that people can hold on to.
So you should be able to read it on a page and love it. You should be able to hear someone else read it and love it. You should be able to hear somebody spit it free form and love it. I think that is going to be a great poem.
I use sports analogies with it all the time. You don't go out into a basketball court and try and play basketball without ever having watched a basketball game. If you're going to just watch bad basketball players play basketball, you're never going to learn how to do it. You're going to think that's what it is.
If you had a swordsman, right, and all he does is just swing blindly, he might win a couple fights, and you could call him a good swordsman, but from a technical aspect, he's not actually carefully placing anything that he does. And in the long run, he's bad.
Poetry is therapeutic. It's therapy for the poet. For the person putting it down on paper is therapy. So I don't really like to say that there's a bad versus good.
I think we need to return to our roots when it comes to poetry, because your medium is words.
The real greats that you look at today, like your Ed Mabrys, your Scott Woods, your Jay-Z, the Juggernaut, like if you look at those guys and if they stopped working the first time somebody clapped for them, you wouldn't know about it.
When you perform a poem, if you've done it right, you should feel tired afterwards.
what